All right, so I got an update here for you guys on the ongoing resurgence of the labor movement here in the United States, as Starbucks workers around the country are leading the charge in unionizing their workplace to fight for better pay and better benefits. So I got a good breakdown here from Common Dreams' Brett Wilkins, who points out that our movement is only growing. Workers at over 50 Starbucks are seeking unions, and employees of at least 16 Starbucks locations across the nation filed unionization papers on Monday alone, okay? In one day, 16 different stores filed for unionization, okay? This is absolutely amazing. So just before we get into some of the details of these locations and where exactly they are around the country, just to give you a reminder of how we got to this position. So all the way back in roughly like late November of 2021, we had some of the first Starbucks locations attempting to unionize up in Buffalo and a couple different areas in New York. And they were the first ones who set off this entire chain of events. And they were the ones who basically stood up and decided to originally take on this fight against the corporate wing of the Starbucks Corporation. So just to give you a reminder in terms of what they were up against and the type of anti-union propaganda efforts that they were up against, which are pretty much universal to any attempt to unionize within the United States. They say here from The Guardian, Starbucks launches aggressive anti-union effort as upstate New York stores organize, and they say workers have reported numerous captive audience meetings, one-on-one meetings, store shutdowns, closures, remodelings, and text messages, a mode of contract that was previously used only for emergencies, and dozens of corporate executives have flooded the stores with the intent to deter workers from voting to unionize. Now, thankfully, again, they failed in this entire effort, in this massive anti-union campaign that Starbucks launched, even bringing the head Starbucks CEO, Howard Schultz, to these locations to try to get these workers to vote against the union. I mean, they brought out all of the stops, and, you know, on top of this, we need to pass the PRO Act and other union legislation that would make things like this illegal, okay? Because even though some of these tactics are borderline illegal, they're almost never enforced, and even the enforcement mechanisms we have against corporations who violate labor laws, there are basically no, real consequences in any way, shape, or form in any concrete sense. So, these are the types of things that some of these other Starbucks workers are going to be up against, and that's kind of why I wanted to remind you guys of exactly the types of tactics that they like to use in situations like this. But nonetheless, they're not afraid to take on these fights, okay? So again, we had 16 different stores. He says, what began last month with a promising trickle has turned into a torrent as workers in at least 16 Starbucks stores on Monday moved to unionize. So this is basically the worst nightmare of all of these Starbucks executives who, were launching this campaign and trying to push against these unionization efforts. This is exactly what they were fearing the most, which gives you a good indication that this is a massively popular thing for the actual workers at these Starbucks locations. But he continues saying that Starbucks Workers United, which is affiliated with the Service Employees International Union, announced Monday that workers at 16 of the coffee chain's locations filed for union elections with the NLRB. And in a letter to Starbucks President and CEO Kevin Johnson, organizers at the 16th location to file union papers on Monday, the Garden Home Marketplace Starbucks in Portland, said that they have decided to unionize because it is time that our voices are heard, respected, and considered appropriately. And they also point out that according to More Perfect Union, workers at more than 50 Starbucks stores in 19 different states have now moved to unionize following the successful unionization of employees at 2 Buffalo and New York area stores. So again, you look at the map here, I mean, it's spread out across the entire country, okay? And this is exactly what you need to see, especially at a service-oriented company like Starbucks. It's even more difficult to unionize because they'll use these tactics of, sending different employees to different locations and trying to divide and conquer and using a bunch of different borderline illegal tactics to try to prevent a nationwide movement like this from taking place. But the other portion of this is, Starbucks pretends to be this progressive organization. They've always tried to portray themselves as that. That's sort of part of their branding exercise. And so you see the difference between how they brand themselves and then what they are actually doing when you talk about anti-union tactics like this, okay? And so another part of that is because they branded themselves as this progressive organization, a lot of these workers who work at Starbucks are younger people. They're, maybe they're college students or even high school students in many cases. And, they're people who are more likely to be progressive in the first place and maybe choose a company like Starbucks to go work for because they're assuming that they're somewhat more in line with their values. And so, that's part of the reason why a lot of these people have had the motivations and had the, underlying beliefs that would motivate them to go and believe in a union and try to fight for a union representation. And, so that's an absolutely amazing thing to try to put Starbucks to actually and force them into a corner to actually stand up for the values that they have pretended to espouse. And especially when you have, this many locations locations around the entirety of the country, these types of tactics are going to be that much more difficult to implement at all of these different store locations, right? If you only have Buffalo and a couple other stores in New York that are unionizing, it's significantly easier to break up that effort. But if you have a bunch of different locations, 50 different locations that are trying to do this at the same time, then it's going to be significantly harder to push back. So, at the end of the day, on this channel, this is the entire list, by the way, but on this channel, I'm extremely pro-union, okay? They have their problems. Obviously, some of them are corrupt and have bad leadership, etc. But with all of those problems, okay, it is still a verified fact that if you are a member of a union, you are much more likely to have better benefits and better pay. You're much more likely to be treated with dignity and respect, and you have some sort of a protection within that, collective structure that exists within a union that you wouldn't have if you were just, going face to face with your boss as a single person. You have significantly more leverage if you walk into your boss's office with, 10 of your other coworkers and demand certain things than if you walk into your boss's office by yourself, okay? That's sort of the message at the end of the day of why unions are effective, why they work. We know that under a capitalist system that employers and corporations, they want to extract as much surplus value out of their workers as physically possible, pay them as little as possible, give them the shittiest benefits possible, and do that so that they can shovel more money into their executives' pockets and the pockets of their shareholders. So unions are basically the best way that we have under a capitalist mode of production to level that playing field. It's not perfect. It's not my ideal world, obviously, as a socialist propagandist, but it's the best that we have right now. And seeing stories like this and seeing the somewhat revitalization of a labor movement here in the United States is absolutely beautiful to see. So I hope that all of these locations get their unions and get good contracts from their unions. So, solidarity with all of these people, and let's unionize Starbucks, I guess.